So welcome back. We have a very, I think, important topic today, which we're going to be talking about the mother wound. And I feel like that's something else that people are probably more in tune or more aware of father wound, how that presents, like some of the ways in which how you struggle when you are dealing with that. But there's not a lot of talk about the mother wound. And I feel like that's important.
Yes, and I think it has to do a lot with our culture, right? Our mothers son nuestras diosas, we need to respect them, they take care of us, so how dare me say that my mother caused any harm while growing up, right? And I think that's why it's very hush hush that we don't talk about it much.
Yeah, because like there's a lot of guilt attached to that, shame. You're ungrateful if you're talking about our mom, because most of us are very used to our moms. They sacrifice everything for us. They're very hardworking. They go through many challenges, a lot of them, especially when we're talking about immigrant moms who are coming, leaving their countries, and they have to work really hard. So then you feel like, why? Like you said, like, why would I even say that about my mom when she did so much for me and she gave up so much? And like, I'm here because of her, in great part because of her. So yeah, I think there is a lot of shame around that.
But let's start with, I think, because we hear this term a lot, right? The mother wound, heal from the mother wound. But what is mother wound? Especially in our Latinx communities. I think we use this term to describe that intergenerational trauma, the emotional pain that is passed down from our abuelitas to our moms, from our moms to ourselves, and sometimes we do it to our children. So that's what the mother wound is when we get influence, whether it's culture, social, any historical factors that, we have that experience that because we're supposed to be this way or this is how parenting should look like, we don't talk about it, and we keep getting hurt emotionally, physically, because of how they treat us, the name calling, which is very common in acceptance in our culture. Ay, esta mensa, ay, esta babosa. And sometimes I have done it before to my kid, but I'm like, shit.
Yeah, I do it too. And I bring the tone up almost like, ay, babosa, te amo. Like somehow that's supposed to make it better. But then we talk so much about how words matter. And we really do need to catch ourselves when we do things like that, right?
Yes, yes, yes. And I think if we talk about more in regards of our culture, as we use Marianismo, where men are superior than women, right? And the idea that we need to put ourselves last, we carry that resentment, we carry that emotional neglect because in our unconscious, we're like, no, we're not supposed to say anything about this. I'm not supposed to talk back. I'm not supposed to set boundaries because our feelings, our needs are all the way to the bottom. Again, with our culture and machismo and that characteristic of the men, there's no space for that dynamic between the child and the daughter, the mother and their children. So I think we're still trying to navigate and understand how much does this affect us, not just individually, but also in society. That dynamic of that relationship is going to impact how we communicate with others. How do we build the relationships? What do we allow for other people to treat us? So I think it's a very important and very sensitive subject that we're going to be talking about today.
Something that, and I'm going to throw it out there and then maybe you can sort of start there and then we can take it to wherever this conversation takes us. Because I really feel that this conversation is meant for specific people today, and I am trusting everything around us, the universe, to sort of guide it and deliver it to those who need to hear it, to maybe begin their healing, to maybe validate their healing or their need for healing. But when you were talking right now about like machismo and those systems, especially within the Latino community or Latinx community, it's really funny how it's very, what's the word I'm looking for? It's very black and white when it comes to men and women. The expectation or having, for instance, a male figure in your life, whether it be a brother, a husband, a partner, anybody, right? If they show violence towards you, because we're also in tune with what machismo is and how much we hate it and how much we want to dismantle it. I feel that most women, even though sometimes we are part of that machismo culture and uplifting it, but I feel like on this, yeah, I feel like on the surface level, it is safe to say that the majority of women and the Latinx community are against machismo and want to dismantle it. So whenever like somebody, a man comes into your life and they show or are violent towards you in any way, immediately, obviously, everybody's like, ¿Qué le pasa? That's not okay. Everybody understands that's not okay. But we never look at violence from a mother the same way. And we always almost label it as like, oh, she's disciplining. She's a good mom because she is, this level of strictness is necessary in order to like raise good children. Like if your dad comes into play and he, as many of us were used to, maybe like uses the belt on you. Most people, even though it's like, it was common, especially for like us, like our generation, there was still some sense of like fear attached to that. Like, you shouldn't do that. Oh my gosh, how he hurt her so bad or he hurt him so bad. But then if a mom did the same thing, it was almost like celebrated.
And I agree, but also when it goes to extreme, as we're seeing on the news, it's like, how dare a mom could do something like this?
Yes, and then it's so confusing, right? It's confusing because
Que te den unas palmadas, you know, it's acceptable to call you stuff and names, but the moment we
humiliate you, it's even okay to humiliate you as long as it's done in the name of discipline.
And it's private, right?
Yes.
The moment it gets out of your house, where other institutions are getting involved here in the United States, right? We have the Department of Children, we have the police officers. The moment other institutions get involved, you become a bad parent. To the extreme, right? And always antagonize the mom on their relationship and their color and their all those other intersectionalities that they carry. So it's very confusing because it's either like, so what do we do? And then at the same time, it's where are we learning that appropriate ways to parent? Where do we get that from? When we have normalized many things. I remember, and I know in your podcast I talk a lot about my mom, but my mom will say, pues yo te pegué, mira cómo estás. You know, like I'm good because I go to school, because I have a job, I'm stable, but I'm like, you really don't know.
Yeah, like the internal stuff is not displayed so openly.
Right?
Yeah.
We learn how to mask, how to carry this, you know, how do we talk about it in front of other people? But it's like idolized, where we like, oh my God, yes, my mom hit me and look at me now. And I even will say things like that, like, well, my mom took the shit out of me and I'm still good, I'm normal, you know. And my parents were very abusive because that's all they knew. So, you know, and going back to the motherhood, why is it so important? Because like you said, one of the questions that you asked was, how does that impact our relationships? If we don't have a good connection with our main caregiver, and if the connection is through violence, through abuse, to power, then we're going to allow other relationships in our lives to treat us the same way. And we can go to, you know, domestic violence, interpersonal relationships, you know. There's so much abuse, there's so much violence when we talk about these women and non-cis individuals as they're going into their relationships, right? They're allowing this violence, they're allowing the name calling, the manipulation, because that's what we know about love. That's our first experience, you know, or one of our first experience with love. That we have, okay, so if my mom treats me this way and she says that she loves me, this other person needs to treat me the same way in order to know that they love me, because that's how we define love, through violence, through aggression, through humiliation. So it definitely impacts, you know. And we talk about the workplace environment. Si tu jefe is like abusador, he treats you bad or she treats you bad, you're gonna allow it because that's all you know, and you feel that's what you deserve. That's your worth, that's your value as an individual.
And these are things that I don't think we like consciously are saying to ourselves. Like,
Yeah.
because I feel like maybe somebody's listening to this and they're like, well, I don't necessarily feel that I deserve this. Like, I don't like that my boss treats me this way. I don't like that my partner humiliates me, you know? But like consciously, you're not saying, oh, yes, I love this, give me more. But this is internally, like down to your nervous system. These are things that your body is recognizing and is okay with them. Like, even though you dislike them, your body's like, oh, but we know this though. You can do this because this is what we know, right?
Yes, yes. And it's not that, like you said, that we're saying, oh, yeah, this is what I love, but then we don't have the space to question it. You know, we don't power enough to speak up about it, to set boundaries.
Because
Because
it's so normal.
it's very normal, very acceptable. And if we complain, it's like, why are you complaining? You already have a job. Like, just do your work right, and he wouldn't say anything to you. Normalizing these things as it happens.
What is the main difference, without obviously getting too deep into like the father wound, because that's not what we're talking about right now, but are there differences, first of all, between those two types of wounds?
I definitely think there's a big difference, especially as how you navigate again that power and control in the diversity of genders that we have, right? Because those gender identities, because if we have a male presenting or a cis man, and you're trying to compare that relationship towards your dad, you know, your father, that's all you know. So I think it has a lot to do with how we're gonna step into relationships and also how much we're gonna allow it. Or we can go to the extreme sometimes where we become that violent person and we are the aggressive. So it's, I think each individual it's different. But there are major difference that is going to be, especially because when you come into therapy, you're going to try to identify where is this pain coming from and how did I learn this behavior. You know, so it's gonna impact both of your parents, whether it was your relationship with your dad or your relationship with your mom or vice versa.
For someone who maybe, because I told you on the last recording that we had, and that was off, off camera, just to like kind of tell you how I did not know. And now the more that I talk about it, the more that I hear about it, the more that I sort of sit with it and question things and allow my mind to be okay with the things that I'm questioning, I feel like there is a bit of, challenges that I feel that I'm dealing with related to the mother wound. And I can totally relate to what you were saying earlier, because I grew up with both my parents, but out of both my parents, the very obvious abuser, because he really was an abuser in every extent of the word, he was very emotionally abusive, very physically abusive, was my father, and specifically towards me. The dynamic between him and I was very obviously an abuse type relationship. So it was always like, obviously, all the things that I dealt with, it was always so easy to be like, of course, this is all having to do with, the dynamic and how I grew up with my dad.
Yeah.
So I never even questioned the other side, because, to go back to what you were saying earlier, my mom was, in fact, extremely hardworking. She did so much for us. Like, I love her with every cell of my being, of course, and I'm very grateful for so many things that she did for us. But when I started to maybe pinpoint things that could be directly, geared towards her and my relationship with her, or things that maybe I feel were extremely damaging that she did, I felt so much guilt, because I never, ever, ever questioned my love for my mother, ever. And when I started to think about this, I was like, oh my gosh, am I questioning the fact that she loved me? And that was very impactful for me. Mm-hmm. And so I think that that's why it's been a slower process dealing with that, because I have to consciously, intentionally tell myself, this has nothing to do with the love you feel for her and the love she feels for you, right? But it's very hard working through that.
Yes, and if we put everything on this gender roles, right? When we have the father wound, we can think about the emotional absence, the validation and approval that we seek from our male presenting cis men parents, the abandonment because physically sometimes they're absent because they're overworking, they don't have time to go to the school stuff, it's usually the mom. So as we talk about the mother, when like you mentioned, we carry that guilt and shame, we carry the emotional overwhelm that sometimes happens. We can all even talk about the nurturing, right? That we see our moms as the main nurturing and emotional support. So when they fell us into that, that's when the dynamics becomes a little bit different.
Yeah, and it's definitely something a lot harder to navigate without, feeling guilt and feeling like you're such an ungrateful daughter, you're an ungrateful person. Look how much she does. Till this day, my mom does so much for us till this day, which I'm completely, like, wholeheartedly thankful and grateful for. But it's okay to still be like you said, for whatever reason, not intentionally, maybe this is all they knew, they did the best they could, but it's okay to say that was very hurtful, that damaged me and impacted me.
Yes, definitely. Because, yeah, our moms, at least for my own experience, my mom is still very involved in my life. She helps me with things, like if I need to print something, like even for my school stuff. And I love that, those are the moments that we can really connect and be there for each other. But she's still gonna throw her comments. She's still gonna say things that is gonna dysregulate me. So I need to be able to learn how to navigate that and set boundaries. How much can I tolerate be with my mom? And a lot of people, when they hear me saying that, they're like, oh, Muriel, how can you say something like that? But it's true. I can tolerate being with my mom this amount of hours. After that, I'm done. I'm drained. I become very aggressive, like very reactive to what she's saying, and I'm no longer have the space to regulate myself when she's saying things like that. So, and I think that's something that we need to learn about the mother wound is your mom is not, just because you become aware of it, it doesn't mean that she's gonna change her ways. Right.
If anything, and correct me if I'm wrong, if anything, you are now going to be utterly triggered by everything, and you're probably going to see those things that maybe were kind of like signals of something to you, but you couldn't pinpoint what, and now you're just triggered constantly.
Because we're going through that grief stage, right? We're grieving the thought of having a healthy relationship with our mom. And the moment we identify, like, it was never healthy, it was very manipulative, it was very power and control dynamic, you're going through a lot of anger, through a lot of sadness.
Yes.
Bergen, so just as the grief cycle, we're gonna hit all those spaces. Pretty normal to just be acceptance of that, So as we accept and we recognize, yes, there has been mother wound, we have some characteristics, we have developed some symptoms, it's not gonna fix our relationship with our parents, with our moms.
I feel like my very first direct sign was I was suddenly enraged by things that my mom would say, especially when they came to like me, like my experiences and like the lens that she was viewing them through and her explanations of them. And almost, I don't think even she realized it, but it almost felt like gaslighting. And so I was, and those were things that happened my whole life. This wasn't new. These were like explanations she would give that I knew. And it didn't necessarily make me feel well, but I accepted them. Like, oh, well, yeah. Like I was almost trying to rationalize it and be like, yeah, that makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, I think the shift for me, and it was a slow shift, but I think the very, very direct or very obvious shift for me was when I became a mom. Because then all of a sudden, those same explanations or those same things that were being said before, after I became a mom, now I'm looking at it through the lens of my own relationship with my children. And then I started to become more uncomfortable and upset and annoyed. And then eventually they were so triggering that I would feel rage. And I was like, that's not okay. I shouldn't be reacting this intensely to something like that. So then that's when I thought, I think I think I may have a problem when it comes to this area.
And I think as we talk about the mother wound and how does it manifest, it's very unique for everyone, right? But we're talking about things such as low self-esteem, chronic ongoing guilt and shame, questioning everything we do as a parent, the emotional suppression where we don't want to talk about these, it really gets bottled up, and the fear of failure, the fear of becoming our own parents, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's you as a parent or you as a wife or whatever your role is, like that fear of being our parents, because we still don't understand, like, why, if I love them, why am I feeling this rejection towards who they are and how I don't want to be similar to them. So those are some things that comes up, and it could be seen as people pleaser, right? We're always doing things. We have a hard time saying no. The perfectionism inside of us at times where we want to everything to be perfect, by the teeth, like we don't want any errors. The codependency that we have, whether through our partner or maybe through our parents, it's like even though we know we're getting emotionally hurt, we keep going back, right?
Yes.
Going back, we cannot say no. Being sometimes overachievement or underachievement of how we want to be this perfect child to them as an adult, right? We try to make all these things perfect for them, but then we're putting ourselves all the way to the bottom. That's how behavioral it sometimes it comes manifest to us. And then we could talk about the emotional piece where we have difficulties trusting other, because if this person that gave birth to me that says they're supposed to love me, because that's what we see on TV, right? That's what we see on the novelas, that these moms that are 100% there for their kids, and she still hurt me, I'm going to have a hard time trusting other people, or I'm going to trust people right away. It's either or. The fear of abandonment, the fear of letting go, or fear that people are going to leave that behind, overdoing the caretaking role. Again, that perfectionist piece where we just want to be perceived and portrayed as this perfect person, and we're going to put our happiness, our well-being all the way to the bottom. And some repeating patterns from our parents, from our moms that we have learned. We connected to the culture, we accept this dysfunctional family settings that sometimes we get. And I'm not talking about divorce, I'm not talking about blended families. I'm talking more about acceptance of violence, aggression, neglect, that we carry, and we bring that into our family nuclear system. We bring that into our relationships. So it could manifest in many different ways, and talking about our body, that somatic stuff that we're always stressed. The pressure on our necks, our shoulders, our back, we feel exhausted, we're always tired, and we don't understand, like, why am I feeling this way. And then we're having all these negative self-talks, we're ruminating on our past, we're trying to do things different in our present, thinking, this is how I'm going to change my past. This is how
Yeah.
I delete it. The very black and white thinking that you were talking about. So it manifests, like I said, in many different parts of your life.
And one in particular, because like you kind of went into, which I guess is similar to the father wound, like because that child caregiver relationship, like whatever you learn from your caregiver, whether father or mother, you kind of replicate in like your romantic, especially in your romantic relationships. I heard somebody say, honey, it's not your type, it's your pattern of behavior that you're attracted to certain people. And that was like, right? Because going back to when I was younger, oh, girl, oh, I get chills thinking how awful that was. But yeah, but so we talk about how that projects itself or how it presents itself with romantic relationships. Usually that's what we talk about. But I'm very curious, and I'm wondering if that has something to do with it. Our ability as women, people who identify as that, and are dealing with a mother wound, how does that come up for us when it comes to relating with other women, like friendships?
That could also lingering into having those toxic relationships with your friends, right? If we're talking about for a cis woman perspective, my female friends, are we gonna connect or bond through trauma? or we're connecting through that fake expectation of how to be a perfect daughter and forget all about how our mothers hurt us. So it's going to be very different, very, very different, very unique. I hope with time, you come to a place where you find friends that have also healed and are elevated with you in that sense. Because we need to have that support system. And eventually we're going to talk about how do we support ourselves. Having people in your life that understands the mother wound and is going to validate and accept and confirm that those boundaries are needed, it's what's going to help you go through it. Because if I have a friend that is having a very toxic relationship with their mom, and I'm here trying to set boundaries, and I know it's very difficult for me, I know it's very painful for me to do it, and I go back to my friend for support, I'm not going to hear good things. She's going to criticize me as a daughter. She's going to question, like, what if that happens to you with your kid? What if your kid wants to stop talking to you and blah, blah, blah. So I really need to have support that are elevated with me, that are there with me and understand this process, understands this healing.
Yeah.
No?
And at least respect, right, what it is that you're doing for yourself, because we can all be dealing with our own healing journey and kind of going through the process. And maybe you're at a point in your healing journey where I genuinely do not understand the actions that you're taking, but my own healing process is allowing me and to respect whatever it is that you're doing and for me to just be there for you.
Yes. So I think, that's what we need. That's what we need. And as we talk about, like, so how do we know what are we doing? And I think some questions to ask ourselves is, how do I feel about myself at this moment when I'm having this toxic conversations, dynamics with my mom? Do I feel empowered? Do I feel like she's lifting me up? Or do I feel the other way around? And if you constantly checking with yourself, and not just with your mom, but with any other relationships, you're going to be able to identify, okay, this is not a good environment for me. This is not a healthy conversation. I need to set boundaries because it's making me feel uncomfortable. It's actually hurting me. I don't feel validated. They're belittling me. They're making fun of me. They're bullying me. So I'm going to remove myself from that situation. And thinking about, do I have the ability to set boundaries? How difficult it is for me to set boundaries, because the moment we become aware of what's happening, that's going to come with actions. What are my next steps now that I'm learning that this situation is not the best for me? So being able to do all of that.
Right now, as you were talking, because last night when we were messaging each other to confirm we were going to be doing this today, I was like, you're like, oh, are there any more questions that came in? And because we had actually scheduled to do this a couple of weeks ago, but then I had an emergency and we couldn't do it. And I'm actually just now thinking of something that I think is very, very important when it comes to men and the mother wound. Men with this challenge that they're experiencing this and maybe they're not aware of it yet, right? Because I think that's where the problem lies. When you're not aware of it, you're just kind of like acting out of whatever your body says or feels without understanding why you're doing what you're doing. Mm-hmm. A man with a mother wound who is not yet conscious of it or hasn't identified that, mm-hmm. It can be almost, it's also the extreme, right? Like it can be also very abusive emotionally, almost violent, I think, because they tend to sort of see you and every woman in their life as that projection of the mother that maybe wasn't there, that harmed them, that neglected them, whatever. Or they can be the partner that almost needs for you to save him and to mother him.
Yes, and I think this is a whole new podcast, but
yes. Yes, because correct me if I'm wrong. I say this, and I might have said it to you again at some point, but I have said this before, and I have to be very careful who I say it to because I get some resistance and I get some looks, and but I really think that sometimes toxic behaviors from women, moms raising boys that have very toxic behaviors, have so much to do with upholding the patriarchy. I really think that that's like one of the biggest roots, one of the biggest causes. And so when I have talked with women who are struggling with partners who, and I'm not a professional, of course, but just, it's like I can tell, or I can sort of feel like, oh, I wonder how their relationship with their mom is. And then eventually something comes up and then I'm all, oh, yes, right? Like, but I don't say anything because I'm not a professional. This is all a dialogue in my head, right? But how do you deal with someone like that as a woman, as a cis woman, who's like, because it's draining, right? It's draining because it's like both extremes. What do you do? What steps can you take? Like, can you even bring it up? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a lot, and it's such a great question because there's a lot of projecting in that relationship. We're talking about, again, we're cis women, we date cis men, so that's that perspective that we're talking about.
Yeah, that's the view.
Because the dynamic is going to change based on your sexual orientation. But as we talk about directly about cis men, the emotional suppression, right? Where men growing up are not allowed to show their feelings. Que los hombres no lloran. ¿Por qué estás llorando? Take it like a man. Men are
right.
All these very positive but negative and very invasive thoughts and comments that we give to our boys, our cis boys growing up, that it is really gonna affect them because they're not gonna have that ability to connect with their partner, right? They're not gonna understand, why is my wife crying at this moment? Why is she getting triggered? And we're gonna reject it, and that's when the gaslighting comes in, right? Because it's the way my mom used to do that. So I'm going to try to defend myself right now. So that dynamic could be very toxic. And even as we talk about relationship issues, intimacy is going to be a major one. Like, how am I going to connect intimately with my partner with all I'm seeing is how my mom used to treat me, right? So it becomes very difficult. And that repetition of those dysfunctional patterns growing up, where we have the expectation, well, you're the woman, like you have to cook, you have to clean, you have to do all these things in the house.
The very quote unquote, which I know this isn't a thing, but this is how a lot of them describe themselves, like the quote unquote alpha male.
Oh my
I'm
God,
just like, how did you feel failed by your mother? Is my question all the time.
Because it's about the struggles with that traditional notions of masculinity, It doesn't, I never know how to say in English, but that masculinidad that the men carry.
Yeah.
Traditional that they have to follow step by step. So especially like their mother expectations as how they're supposed to be a man. So you have that internalized criticism, the internalized conflict where, ooh, my mom wouldn't want me to be this way. So now I'm going to man up and ask my wife, where's my
whatever
wife?
That means, right? Like man up, whatever that means.
So, like I said, it's a whole podcast about this, and it will be nice to talk about it with men in this because we really
yes.
like you. But it is very conflicted,
Yeah.
Especially the Latinx community where we see men as providers. And that's all we see. Well, mi esposo tiene que trabajar, tiene que pagar las cosas, tiene que hacer esto, el otro. And we talk about it as we're dating. The expectation when this person that I'm meeting is going to take me on a date, he has to pay the bill. He has to do all these things.
Yeah.
And if they're not, then, you're not man enough.
Yes.
I need that type of man.
Yes.
And I'm like, what's going on? You are self-sufficient.
I nomás te invité unos tacos. Yeah, like, and I guess like, and because like, I don't know, it could be the opposite for some people. In my case, my mom she was a professional. She had a career. Unfortunately, she had to leave that when she, migrated to the United States, but she was still very much the breadwinner. Like, that's who she was. And I it was very hard for me. I kind of struggled with that growing up. Growing up, it was normal. Like it wasn't weird for me. It was weird when around my friends, their mom stayed home. And not in a negative way. Like I never looked at it as a negative way ever. It was just weird because I didn't know, even though my mom, to the best of her capacity, she was there very much emotionally. And I think due to her profession and being an educated woman of that time, because nowadays that's more common, but of that time, she was a bit more emotionally intelligent. And she had a little bit more understanding of like, I have to be there for them. I have to let them feel these feelings. They can talk to me. They can be open with me. So that was a really positive aspect of my relationship. My daughter, my sisters as well, with our mom. But so when I saw my friends that their mom stayed home, it wasn't weird. It was actually like I craved that in a way, even though my mom was emotionally present, because I was like, my mom was always gone. My mom was always gone. And I didn't understand how much I craved that until I became a mom. And then I realized I need to be home for my kids.
Understanding that we learn motherhood from our parents, from our abuelitas, you know, there's going to be also some conflict of how you want to carry that motherhood, you know, well, what are some things that you like? And that's something I have always had a conflict with, because I have learned that I have always rejected motherhood. That's just not my thing. But it doesn't mean that I don't love my child.
Right. And like coming to terms with that and being at peace with that, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And see, for me, I almost for a long time felt, I don't want to say less than, because I never felt less than, but I felt like I'm failing as a woman, because coming from a family that the women are very strong and when I say strong, it was always attached to their productivity level, right? Outside the home, like the working and professionals all the time. So I kind of forced myself to go back to school, because I was like, I can't, my mom left her career she loved, came to this country, and I'm just not going to even try to go to school. So I went to school, got a couple degrees, but then I was like, but I love being at home with my kids. I really, really do. But then I struggled with that, because it was like, oh my gosh, but everything that women have fought for. So you know what I mean? It was a conflict. It was a conflict of like, Julie, but you're capable and you should, and now you have to be a role model for your daughters. What do you mean you're just going to stay home? So I think for a long time, I myself sabotaged that role that I really liked. I really, really liked it. But it was hard. It was hard.
Definitely hard. And because you could be all these things as long as you don't neglect your job as a mother, right? That's what society puts in you. And I hear a lot from even like my suegra, where, why you're not cooking, why you're not cleaning? And I'm like, well, I could work, you know?
Yeah. I have a dissertation to write.
You know, but again, the expectation where we have to, again, put ourselves last, our needs, our wants, our desires, to fulfill these roles, you know? And that's one of the things that I'm talking about in my book, about rejecting motherhood, that we don't need to carry all of that. We now, at some level, live in a society that we can utilize other resources to do some stuff, and also do what you like.
Yeah.
You know, but we're always like in it, especially with women. When are you having kids? Why you're not having kids if you're married? But if
Why don't you have more than one?
But if you're a single mom, how dare you? You know, te malograste tu futuro. And it's like, what kind of message are we sending? You know, what kind of message are we sending to our women here in society, to our mujeres? Because it's not either one thing or another. That comes from motherhood. You know, the expectation that tenemos que ser señoritas, we cannot have sex until we get married, and we have to wait until our husband que nos descubra and then have kids. You know, I was a single mom. I married with being a single mom, and it's a very different family dynamic, right? But all the backlash that I received when they find out I was pregnant, it was never welcoming in a positive environment. You know, it was very negative, like, oh, te dañaste la vida, ¿qué vas a hacer ahora? ¿Por qué no estudiaste? No puedes cerrar las piernas. All this negative stuff that comes with that. You know?
Immediately attacking like your character as well, right?
Yes,
Like this is
yes.
you are in fact a whore because now you did this ahead of time and
Yeah, so
like
there's,
what?
it's like this list that we need to follow, and if we don't follow through it, then we're all these bad things. You know,
Yeah.
and those are things that we learn from our parents, especially for our moms. So we need to be really, really careful as how we're learning. And if you are a parent and you're learning about whether it's mother or father wound and how it's affecting you, being very self-aware and reflect on how are we ending that intergenerational trauma, how we're
Yes.
cutting that off, and how we're rewriting this new narrative. You know, what are some of the good things that we want to pass on to our new generations? You know, those healthy relationships, those values that we want, you know, because we're just going to keep damaging. And the damaging is going to keep going on and on and on, nonstop.
And we have to put a stop. And you can tell me if this is like a good coping mechanism or not. But what I've sort of adapted for myself, because I'm human and I have teenagers and I have an oldest daughter who is so amazing, but she's very firm. And which I love. I love that she's very honest and she's very firm and she knows what the hell she wants and she has no problem saying no, which is problematic for my ego. Right? For my ego, it's not a wrong thing. She's not wrong. It's my ego that's attached to this. So one of the things that I've adapted is whenever I am triggered by something she says or does, and it could be a little thing, it could be a big thing. I have really almost like trained myself to shut my mouth because we are very reactive, right? Like we just like whatever we feel like, why are you talking to me like that? What's your problem, right? So I've trained, I had to train myself. It really was a training situation
Anger.
because
Yes.
yeah, it was. I had to stop and it's okay that I'm bothered by it. Like I no longer give myself a hard time. It's like that bothered me, but then it's immediately like, well, why did it bother me though? Like let's deconstruct it. Is this really harmful or is it my own crap, right? Because there have been times where after sitting with it for a little bit and really being honest with myself, I can genuinely be like, no, that was not okay. And then next time that it happens, I can say, hey, that was not okay. That wasn't cool. But I've already sat with it. You know what I mean? And I know it's no longer my triggers, my shame, my guilt playing over my projection, perhaps. But that was really hard. And it's still hard sometimes. I'm getting better at it, but it's hard.
And you can go more deep and ask yourself, what message did I receive from my mom in a situation like this?
Yes. You know what? I didn't necessarily word that, but I actually think I tried to think of times when my mom maybe perhaps said something like that, or I heard her say something like that about someone else. And I think how me, teenager, because that's probably when I was more aware of certain things. How would teenage me, when I heard that, how did I feel about that? And then that's a quick, and sometimes, you know what? Sometimes, Muriel, I have to be like, I still didn't like it and I don't like it. But in all honesty, it's me. And I just have to let her be, and eventually I'll probably work that out myself. But just keeping myself quiet has been so helpful. And I'm sure I fail in many other ways because it's constant. It's this constant. It feels constant.
We're
Yeah.
human. So going back to that expectation where we need to be perfect parents, now that I know about my mother wound, therefore I need to be perfect. Hell
Right.
no. It's not as a therapist, I messed up sometimes.
Yeah.
With my own child, and I'm constantly trying to have very open conversations with him about, okay, what I did was fucking wrong. Like, I'm so sorry, but let's stop.
Yeah.
Because I'm human, I'm not perfect. And I think that's the thing where people really need to learn and understand and accept that just because we carry specific roles, it doesn't mean that we're gonna be that 24/7.
kind of backtracking to what I was saying, that I really wanted this. I wanted my family. I wanted to be home. I really wanted the opportunity to parent them the way that I wanted to be parent. Like, let's be honest, right? I really, really wanted that. But then also, because there's so many layers to us and me individually, I have so many interests and pursuits and things that I want to learn. So it was also at some point, I also felt lost in the role of motherhood. And I almost like, I don't want to say that I disliked it, but I felt like I was drowning in it. Right. And so then there was another part of me that was like, but you wanted this. You really wanted this. What do you mean now you need a break? Now you want to pursue this other thing. You know what I mean? Like it's,
You know,
it's so much.
it's a very hot topic because it really opens many, many windows and doors.
Yeah.
You need to learn how to, yes, open it, receive the air, and then close it, because you don't have to process all of that in one day, in one session. It's gonna take time. It's about going to therapy and work on yourself and understanding. And I think it's very important to say that as you go through this process of healing your mother wound, forgiveness, it's not gonna define how faster or how sooner or how later you're gonna heal. Last, because we have this misconception: si no perdonas, no te vas a curar. Si no perdonas,
Yeah.
no vas a poder vivir una buena vida saludable. No, it doesn't have to be like that. I can continue healing, understanding that I might not forgive my parent because of a specific situation at this moment, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
We have this very misconception that if we don't forgive, then we're not doing it right. Then we're not healing 100%. Our healing is not real. You know, that forgiveness, it's really intimate, it's really personal, and the person is gonna go through it when they're ready to go through it or not.
Yeah, that's another thing. Like you may not. You may not, but you may be at peace with the fact that you don't want to forgive that, or you just don't even want to bother with that anymore and just kind of close the door on that. And I feel like it's something that's ingrained for a lot of people, no matter like your background, but specifically for the Latinx community, you know, that forgiveness factor.
A religious connection,
That's
right?
that's what I was gonna say, because it really comes down to religion. Like you're gonna go to hell if you don't forgive, you know. And it's like, but or if you don't love a parent, if you decide like, wow, yeah, I don't love this person. You're like they want to force you to love this person that doesn't deserve your love.
Yes.
And it's okay. You don't have to love nobody. Love yourself.
Yes.
Love yourself.
Definitely. So, you know, there's steps. So if this is something that you identify with, that you're noticing like, oh, shoot, you know, there's a few things that really light up on me and I really need to navigate, understand more, go to therapy, ask for help, you know, read some books. I haven't found a specific book that I like yet, but if I ever do, I'll let you know. But do the work, you know, we have to do the work. And the work doesn't look like just going to therapy. Manifest in many, many different ways. It could be therapy, it could be holistic, it could be support groups, it could be, you know, working with yourself first. It could manifest in many, many different ways. So don't try to follow like this box, you know, because yeah, I preach all about therapy, but sometimes therapy is not for everyone, and that's okay. That's totally okay. Maybe my way of doing healing and doing my work might not align with the type of work that you need, but it doesn't mean that you don't need support and you're not going to get it in a different form.
That's what I was going to say. Therapy can sometimes also come in a different form. And maybe sometimes it just means you're not ready for that one-on-one, you know, face-to-face therapist relationship to happen yet. Like maybe you just need to start softly and slowly somewhere else. And I think I'm going to take you up on this. Maybe we can pick up and I'm going to see if I can grab someone that's willing to be our victim for like a cis, you know, that presents a cis man, to come on and be open about these things, because I really think that a lot of the healing, yes, of course, individual healing, women healing is going to be a major shift for society. But I think also like healing with men, whew,
Yeah.
so many things would be, I don't want to say cured, but would settle, and would the world, our immediate environment would be more peaceful if more men decided to detach from societal expectations of this manly, manhood thing that they have to navigate the world as, and just be vulnerable.
And we don't take care of our men enough. We do not. As a
Yes.
society, they're very neglected. It's always something bad, as we talk about cis men. It's because, we talk about crime, we talk about not being a good parent, not being a good member of society. That's the only reasons we talk about men. We never talk about in the sense where they need support. Their mental health, their life also matters. We need to be
Yeah,
there.
they need caring in their life and support, and to feel loved. And with my last guest, we touched a little bit on this awful thing with men sometimes, like that they suppress so much, and then they come to the table and can be very scary at times, right? Because that's just how it presents itself. But we were talking about how sometimes, like, the problem with feminism, toxic feminism, is in fact also that idea of we hate everything that has to do with men. But that's not the solution. Like, feminism is about equality and care and support for everyone. So everyone finds what suits them best and what helps each individual thrive.
Yes, yes, yes. Another big example, and I don't want to be political or anything, but what's happening in Palestine? We worry about.
Yeah. Oh, no, girlfriend, you can be political all you want. I
We
don't
don't
care.
talk about the men that are going through this suffering.
Yes.
Once moving this, all the stuff. They're doing everything. Talk about them. We don't have compassion for them. We don't know.
They don't even come to mind.
They don't. They don't. And it's very heartbreaking because that's how men are seen in society. They can deal with it.
Yeah. We don't think of their suffering.
We do not. We do not.
We don't, because if you think the language matters, everybody's like, oh, the innocent men, and like the innocent women and children. Of course, that's heartbreaking, but men are there too.
It's a lot, and I don't think we don't even know what is that gonna look like in
Yeah.
the next 10 years.
Yeah, because right now it's like the survival mode, right? Like right now it's like, let's just
they've
find
been
immediate
surviving for
ceasefire.
75 years, and we see a lot of things that are happening, but this is very worldwide. I think we're witnessing this genocide and all these horrific things that are happening. So going back to that, how many like the support that they're gonna need to heal that wound, because we're not just talking about the loss of their family members, we're talking about the loss of their identity,
Yeah.
home, their land, there's a patriotismo that we carry on as being Mexican, Peruvian, that the identity that really, makes us like lift up our chest and talk about our culture and talk about our identity. We're taking away all of that from them. So
Yeah.
I'm afraid how is that going to manifest in the next 5, 10, 15 years, because it hasn't been manifesting in a healthy way, and it's going
Yeah.
to get worse. So it's really heartbreaking. So I hope, with your next guest, it's someone that can talk about, as a cis man, that understanding of the father, the mother wound, and how that affects male in general.
Yeah, somebody who's not. So if you're listening, before I go on a scavenger hunt myself, if you're listening and you're willing, reach out to either one of us. Do you care that they reach out to you, maybe?
Of course, yeah, they can reach out.
Yeah, and the door's open for you guys, because that's going to be an interesting conversation. So I think that's probably going to be our next topic.
We don't know when, but
We don't know when.
it will be
And
our next topic.
Yes, pero everybody send good vibes to Muriel, because her dissertation's coming in 2 weeks, and all your hard work
Oh my
is
God.
about to just
Yes, yes. My oral defense is coming up, and I'm really excited. I'm really scared. And I think I've been doing a lot of self-recording, talking about my experience because I want to remember these emotions. I want to remember this process. I don't want to just focus on, oh yes, I did it. I also want to embrace those parts of me that really suffer, cried, and
Yeah.
whined and felt angry through these last 2 years because all my parts deserve to celebrate.
Deleítate en todo lo que viene.
Yes, I am. I'm looking forward to.
Okay, so entonces we'll keep in touch. You let me know when's a good time for you. But in the meantime, thank you all very much for listening. As always, I'm going to go ahead and link up places where you can find her, reach out to her. If you guys have any questions, reach out to me. And I hope that this conversation was helpful and was the beginning of something beautiful for everyone.
Yes, and don't forget that this is not a therapy session. It's
No.
informative. So if it's something that it has we planted the seed, you need to find a professional that is going to be able to water it and work with you through it, because podcasts are helpful to give you the information, but we're not doing the therapeutic work. It's very intimate. So look for support when you need it. You can go through Julie, through myself, based on your state, finding that support, the resources that you need.
Right. And as you've mentioned many times before, if for some reason you don't know where to start, online support groups are a great way to maybe get your toes wet a little bit and ask around. So yeah, always seek out support, because these are just conversation starters, but they're not the work.
Yes.
All righty, Muriel. Thank you so much for being with us again. And I'm going to go ahead and keep in touch with you for our next one.
Thank you. Thank you.